Dober dan, hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this exciting event. I'm so happy to be part of it, although I can't be with you in Ljubljana. This talk is pre-recorded. I'm some 600 kilometers away, but I'll be online for the Q&A session. Happy to answer any questions you may have. When AVTE published the Machine Translation Manifesto about a year ago, it attracted quite a lot of attention among professional subtitlers and in the industry as well. The manifesto is our take on machine translation. It's available from AVT's website and it has been translated into a couple of languages, including Slovenian. The manifesto has been discussed at some other Translating Europe workshops, so I'm not going to introduce it once again. Instead, I'd like to elaborate on some of the most important points we raise in the document, and in particular, I'd like to discuss the other language technologies that are often sidelined and put them in context. But first, let me ask, does machine translation help? Well, of course, machine translation works for some types of text. For example, results are quite good for technical and legal translations. On the other hand, machine translation can produce hilarious suggestions and it can be downright counterproductive for some other texts. And this is true for audio-visual translation, although machine translation can be helpful in some cases, for example when it comes to some types of documentaries. Anyway, just like fire doesn't belong to children's hands, machine translation, in my opinion, should not be used by translators who don't know about its dangers. Otherwise, they may produce worse translations than they would produce without machine translation. Then the burden is usually shifted to the QCer, and therefore, in my opinion, if machine translation is to be used, its users should be trained. They should know how machine translation works, what they can expect, when it's safe to use it, and when it's not a good idea to use it. Let me mention some of the dangers. It's inconsistencies within the same text when the same words or expressions are translated in different ways. Misspellings in proper names. Situations when a word is translated as if it were another similar word. For example, draining translated as if it were raining. Too literal translation, including incorrect word order. Which is a very common problem in translations from Germanic languages into Slavonic languages. Loss of richness and diversity of language. And something that is called hallucinations, even in scientific literature. It's when the translation has little in common with the original. The dangers are many, so it's small surprise that it turned out in an informal survey among a large team of subtitlers that the first thing most of them do when they get subtitles pre-translated by a machine is they delete the machine translation suggestions. Machine translation users should also know what other technologies there are to make their task easier and the quality higher. Another important point that needs to be raised again and again is that machine translation engines are trained by our translations. They try to simulate us. Make no mistake, they wouldn't work if there weren't for us translators. So we should really ask, is it fair that the authors of the translations used for machine translation training normally don't get a single cent for that. Some thinkers suggest that micropayments should be paid to authors of any data that is used to generate income. For example, Jaron Lanier elaborates on this idea in his book Who Owns the Future? Unfortunately, micropayments aren't a feasible option in machine translation at the moment. I think that we subtitlers, translators, and translation scholars should team up with economists, lawyers, and technologists to look for ways to make it possible, because it would help achieve sustainability, and it's something that would benefit the viewers and clients as well. We are not Luddites, but we don't buy the recent hype. Machine translation is often presented as a technology which can or will soon be able to replace translators, although it is not true. Therefore, we like to shift the focus. We believe that technologies should be used where they are beneficial, and they should not be used wherever they are harmful. And indeed, machine translation can often be very harmful. Unfortunately, machine translation is often presented as the only technology there is, as the only language technology there is, as a panacea. At this point, I would like to mention an important concept: bytext. Bytext is bilingual text where the original and translation have been aligned. A sentence in the translation is matched with the corresponding sentence in the original. Bytext is a highly valuable asset because it can be used in several ways, as a translation memory or as a parallel corpus, but it can also be used to train a machine translation engine, build an autocomplete tool, and for other purposes. One of my messages to translators, and especially audiovisual translators, is that it is quite easy to make your own bytexts, that is, parallel corpora or translation memories, using alignment tools. Then the aligned files can be used as a corpus per se, as a translation memory in a CAT tool, to build autocomplete tools in some CAT applications, or to train or fine-tune a machine translation engine. But for all of this, it is critical for translators to be able to keep their translations along with the originals so that they can use them in these and other ways. And this should be part of fair practices, enshrined in service contracts and respected by non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. Today, many NDAs don't allow us to keep our own translations, although they sooner or later become available on pirate servers. I've heard that some subtitlers download their own translations from pirate servers for their personal archive. I believe that NDAs should be revised. It's in the interest of our clients, because when we are equipped with these data and tools, we can provide better translations. Let me move on to another central concept: augmented translation. As I've said, there's too much fascination by machine translation. It's seen by many as the linguistic holy grail. Therefore, machine translation is sometimes developed at the cost of other technologies, and augmented translation allows all these technologies to be on an equal footing. The concept of augmented translation suggests that the translator is surrounded by different tools and technologies, and chooses the right one at any given moment. The important thing is that it is the translator who is in control. They are in the driver's seat, if you like, and they are like the pilot in the cockpit. Therefore, the user interface should be configured accordingly. The translator should be able to turn on and off whatever they wish to. For example, it should be possible to hide machine translation suggestions when the translator wishes not to see them. Here you can see an illustration of the concept. It's from the Machine Translation Manifesto. The translator is in the center and is surrounded by all the exciting tools and technologies. Maybe we should add a few empty bubbles, because we'll certainly see new technologies emerging in the future. Now, what technologies could or should be part of the augmented translation model? Let me go through the most relevant ones and discuss whether or not they are available to audiovisual translators today. First of all, spell checkers. Today, we take them for granted in most language applications, but in some languages, spoken colloquial language, which we deal with in subtitles and dubbing most of the time, is very different from written language. Not only when it comes to vocabulary, but in some languages, the morphology is different as well. Unfortunately, spell checkers are rarely adjusted to spoken language. In my language, Czech, most spell checkers adamantly underline some of the most frequent colloquial words. Last year, I updated the most popular spell checker library, Hanspell, for my language, to ensure better coverage of spoken language. It was quite time-consuming, but it's definitely possible, even for highly inflected languages such as Czech. I'm not sure about agglutinative languages though, but I'm sure that existing spell checkers can be improved to be more helpful for audiovisual translators. I believe that this sort of effort shouldn't be undertaken by individuals working on open source projects. It should be organized and financed by companies developing language tools. By the way, one of the tools you need to build a robust spell checker is a large corpus of relevant texts. Another tool or another type of tools is grammar checkers. The only grammar checker I know for my language is in MS Word, and it may not be available for some other languages. As a subtitler, I cannot imagine having to do without it, because subtitles are more prone to grammatical errors due to segmentation. It's so easy to get things wrong around line breaks. So I always download or export my subtitles from the subtitling application I work in, convert them into normal text with no line breaks, and run the grammar checker in Word. Unfortunately, some clients don't allow their subtitlers to download their own subtitles, so they cannot do this important round of checks. Ideally, a grammar checker should be one of the functionalities of subtitling applications, and they should take into account line breaks. The next tool is voice input, or if you like, dictation functionalities. In non-audio-visual translation, many translators use dictation tools to save time and relieve their fingers and wrists. Some prefer them to machine translation. Unfortunately, some of these tools are not quite compatible with subtitling software. One problem is that you may have to reactivate the dictation tool in every single subtitle. Another thing is the problem with incorrect use of spaces and upper versus lowercase letters by some of the tools. Finally, some dictation tools are geared to certain professions, such as lawyers and doctors, who need very different vocabulary. So once again, it's a matter of colloquial vocabulary and, in some languages, morphology as well. Because some voice input solutions change colloquial language to non-colloquial language, which is something we don't want. I'm confident that little effort could make a huge difference, adjusting dictation tools to the needs of subtitlers and dubbing translators. The next tool or functionality I'd like to mention is concordancing in translation memories or searching corpora. Language service providers have huge amounts of bytext that could be used to look up words, phrases, or even grammatical structures, either monolingually or bilingually. What subtitlers might also appreciate is the ability to search their own translations they have made in the past. This is something that CAT tool users take for granted, but it's wishful thinking for us subtitlers. Sometimes we just need some inspiration. We need to see different options that have been used either by ourselves or by our colleagues to translate a certain expression, instead of seeing just one and only solution offered by the machine translation engine. The next tool is, or next type of tools, is autocomplete tools. With an autocomplete tool, you type the first one or two letters of the word you need to enter, and the tool suggests expressions it has found in its dictionary as equivalents of words found in the original, in the segment that you need to translate, or in the subtitle that you need to translate. Again, it's a relatively common functionality in CAT tools, yet I'm not aware of any subtitling applications that have this tool. The dictionary is another tool, or the dictionary that is at the core of the autocomplete functionality. It could be made searchable. So you would get something like the word alignment database on the Opus website, or the translation equivalence database from the Czech National Corpus. And here it is. It's called TREC. Here I chose the Czech-English combination and looked up equivalents of the Czech word otrok, which has a meaning very different from the same word of Slovenian. So here you can see the English equivalents found in the dictionary, in the database. There are less technologically demanding solutions that benefit the subtitler as well. For example, links to existing online dictionaries. But it's something that we can make on our own. We can use AutoHotkey to set up shortcuts to search some online dictionaries. Here is the code for a shortcut which will look up words in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Highlight the word you need to look up and press Ctrl-Shift-E. Another tool is something I refer to as collaboration tools. It's tools that allow all people working on a certain title to communicate, to discuss things, both horizontally and vertically. That means the individual translators working into the different languages, as well as all the specialists upstream and downstream, template makers, translators, QCers, but maybe also the script writers and others. And of course, there are certainly other tools that I have not mentioned or that will emerge in the future. As for machine translation, I'm sure that it will become more and more advanced. Sooner or later, we'll probably see interactive machine translation where the suggestions will change dynamically as you type, And also, one day we may be able to set a threshold of reliability so that only suggestions of a certain quality, above a certain quality threshold, will be offered. We don't know how these innovations will change the machine translation experience, so it's yet to be seen how beneficial they will be. At this point, let me squeeze in a small practical section for subtitlers who would like to make their own translation memory or corpus and use it in some of the ways I've just described. Very briefly, you first need to clean up the subtitle files, both the original and the translation. You remove things such as the codes, tags, and line breaks. The next step is to align the files. And once you have the alignment, you can import the TM in a CAT tool that supports subtitle files. You can search it in another application. You can use it to build or fine-tune a machine translation engine. We don't have time to go through the process in detail, so I'll show you just some screenshots for some of the steps. If you have just a few files to process, you can use Subtitle Edit to remove the line breaks. It's shareware, quite popular among fan-subbers and even professional subtitlers. Open the file in Subtitle Edit, click File, Export Plain Text, choose Merge All Lines and save. It's also a good idea to remove hyphens and tags for italics. Probably most popular alignment tool is LF Aligner, which is shareware developed by a colleague of ours, a Hungarian translator, András Farkas, and its core uses program called Hanalign. LF Aligner produces a bilingual TXT file and a TMX file. In the process of alignment, you can view the suggested alignment, check it, and fix misalignments. Here, I've tried to align English and Slovenian subtitles for the film Forrest Gump. It's subtitles downloaded from OpenSubtitles.com, and I have no idea if it's a professional translation or fan subs because there's no credit. Anyway, they can serve as an illustration. You can see that there's a misalignment in lines 12, 13 and partially line 14. Let me give you some time to take a look. My experience is that the percentage of misalignments is usually quite low and that it's better to live with it than spend time fixing the misalignments. Now, this is a tool for searching the alignments, the translation memories. In other words, you don't need a CAT tool to search your aligned files. This is my favorite application, TEW Lookup, also by András Farkas. This screenshot shows how you can search the Forrest Gump alignment. The program is very fast and can search huge files. By the way, TEW Lookup comes with a file which explains how to make an auto hotkey script to access TEW Lookup from any application with a shortcut. This is another application you can use for viewing your alignments, Xbench. And finally, as I've mentioned, you can use your aligned files to fine-tune a machine translation engine, and namely, you can do it in a tool called OpusCat. OpusCat is a free desktop-based neural machine translation tool. You need to download a pre-trained engine for your language combination, for your language pair. Unfortunately, engines are available only for the most common language pairs. Once you have the engine, once you have downloaded the file, you can customize, or as it's called, fine-tune the engine using your translation memory. My experience is that OpusCAD works best as a plug-in in a CAD tool. Okay, this has been a short tasting of the technologies you can use even when they aren't available in the subtitling software you use. And now it's time for a wrap-up. I've shown a handful of technologies that may be beneficial to the translator and, in turn, the client and the viewer. Some of them may be even more powerful than machine translation, and it should be left to the individual translators to decide which technologies they will use at any given moment of the creative process. No matter what technologies are provided to the audiovisual translator, they should not be used as an excuse to lower subtitler fees, as is so often happening. We have seen companies introducing machine translation tools and slashing rates by as much as 30%. That is not justified by the real impact on productivity and quality. Remember, many subtitlers prefer not to use machine translation suggestions at all. Also, whatever technologies are employed, the conditions and the entire ecosystem should be set up with sustainability in mind. Otherwise, the best subtitlers will be forced to look for other jobs or they will suffer. And in whose interest is it to have either inexperienced or frustrated collaborators? Here, I've listed the most important sources that discuss the concepts I've talked about, and these are references to the texts I've used as an illustration. Thank you very much, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions in the Q&A session.